welcome back to the channel. This is the final episode in our large series on model practices. In the last episode, I had to break it up into two parts for large Sparx or large scale project implementations. This is the second part of the last episode. So we talked about key challenges and solutions, growing from 1 to 1,000 user connections, very large enterprise projects. We also talked about performance practices, collaboration, reuse practices. In this episode, we're going to be talking about some practical tips for success. We're going to touch on reusable element templates and the importance of those. We're going to jump into governance, which is the most important part that is going to cover a lot of different areas around governance in order to achieve a successful implementation using Sparx Enterprise Architect in your enterprise or very large company or shop. So let's get started. Let's start with some practical tips for success. The first one is start with a default loading page. This way, this helps you maintain focus and momentum and help your users, including yourself, to quickly get to where you need to be. Next, on your landing page or other pages that the stakeholders will be focused on, include links that quickly get them to subject matters that they need to drive. This also includes launching your asset repository, other tools that are necessary for you to progress in your delivery. Next is to use navigation cells in your landing pages. In this case, this is a very large project, has multiple releases that allow your stakeholders to get to areas that are critical to them for managing and delivering in their roles and their responsibilities. Next is to think from each stakeholder's perspective so that they are getting to the necessary information. I practice the Open Group Architecture Framework, or TOGAF, and in here we have the taxonomy of architecture viewpoints. And so you have business architecture, and as we go down here, this column, we see things that business architects and business stakeholders are interested in. Data architects, application architecture, technology architecture, and all the different viewpoints, views and viewpoints of each one of your stakeholders. Since I use this in order to understand the concerns, that each stakeholder has concerns, viewpoints, and views, I try to organize our projects, navigation, and other links around particular stakeholder views and concerns. Next, and again for navigation cells, use colors to represent subject areas. We go into patterns. We will use a navigation cell that follows the color of the originating cell. And so when you're going into each one of these areas, you may be mixing and matching subject areas. The other thing is that when we're coming into a very large project, we may use and color the navigation cells to represent things like what stage the effort's in. You can see here that release 1 is in the development stage, release 2 is in the solution stage, and release 3 is starting out with ideation. But you can apply colors. Unfortunately, you cannot auto-color navigation cells at this time. And I'm on build 17.14 right now and still do not have that capability. But I do use tag values for my navigation cells to help set particular subjects and values to extended meaning of a particular cell or event. Next is to create and use element templates to help you drive your delivery faster. So if you've got pre-built templates, these can later turn into patterns, reusable patterns that you could use across your development and deployment. Why create things from scratch when you can drop in patterns or reusable templates in order to drive? And then we've also talked about MDG technologies. In MDG technologies, you can create toolboxes that you can use to help drive your solutioning and the things that you want to create. Next in practical tips for success is ensure that you've got good governance in place for all of your stakeholders, the projects, even the individual work that you do. Ensure that you're building on a knowledge management platform to maintain your own knowledge as you're delivering your assets and your projects. Next is to ensure that you're training your team on modeling practices and not just tools. Make sure they understand how to navigate a project, how to model in a project, how to use elements such as legends and things like that. Put checklists in place to help drive their delivery and understanding of delivery. Build on the necessary documentation, including project reports, communication plans, and how you're going to succeed in delivering your effort. Next, and as part of your training, make sure that you're reusing industry standards. I am TOGAF certified, used the Open Group Architecture Framework for years. I also use Enhanced Telecoms Operation Mapping, Shared Information Data, and apply these architecture principles to our overall platform architecture for delivering. And every stakeholder is trained on all of these subjects in order to properly and effectively deliver our objectives. Next, and we've talked about this a great deal in the channel, and that's the use of baseline and audit logs to make sure that you're tracking changes as they're taking place. So you've all learned how to build baselines around packages to track changes. As you're working on any model, this is a building block diagram, but any model, we have a common pattern that we use that builds around the notion of logs and logs related to users, policies, and key activities. This is part of project management and ensuring that you're baselining, versioning. Baselines over versioning. Versioning to me is a separate subject out of baseline to track changes, and then audit logs. And we'll be talking a little bit more about audit logs as we're going through in this channel. Another one for practical tips for success is to create a root folder for your team. And your team has their own personal zones where they're able to build on patterns. They can do training. They can do things that are outside of the project, but related to the project. They're going to have their own personal local Sparx instance for doing things. But when they're working with the team, create a team's root folder that allows each one of the users or authorized stakeholders in a project. And this is a very large project through multiple releases throughout the year, that they're able to have discussions and collaborate with members of your shop or organization. I think of governance as guidelines to follow. Governance can be policies and rules or your company's laws, but it should be agile and always up for improvement. The way to view governance is from a it works or it doesn't work perspective. Governance should always work. Speed in delivery is good unless it introduces risk, issues, and failure. For example, failure to deliver on time. But failure to deliver on time doesn't mean to take shortcuts or put the shop or company or yourself at risk. Use an asset repository outside of the large-scale project or any project. This asset repository may contain the company's knowledge management repository and intake node for submissions from other projects, modelers, and stakeholders for governance review. I know I keep saying this, but modeler and stakeholder training is mission critical to your project delivery. Governance is useless if people are not informed, guided, and trained on their jobs and responsibilities. As part of the company's KMS or Knowledge Management System repository, have a methods and procedures root node or KMS root node that contains references to documentation, links, and other references necessary for training. This next part is on baselining and versioning, which is mission critical, especially in large scale projects. We need the ability to track our progress, and it's always a good practice to compare where we've come from. To support this practice, we need to find places in delivery where we can freeze and take a picture of our work so that we can reflect back on it. This is called baseline. To understand what this snapshot is, we set a version number. Get in the habit of versioning each time you make a change, but be clear on what make a change means. Fixing spelling errors is not versioning or need to version, in my opinion. So when do you version versus when do you baseline? Version when you make a significant change. Version when you add new content. Version when you add elements and connections. Baseline when you create a new version. Baseline when you want to take a snapshot of where you currently are or left off. And note, you can always delete or remove a baseline when you return. You're only taking a snapshot to help you remember where you return, but you do not want to leave the baseline within your versioning strategy. Baseline after conference calls where collaboration drove agreements, ideas, and other content relevant to models that were reviewed. Most importantly, follow and adhere to your version and or baseline version numbering strategy. Be consistent. In some cases, you may need to fall back to a baseline previously, but make sure that everyone understands what this entails, what it impacts, when to fall back, and how to get approvals to fall back. Because if you're in a team environment, you want to make sure that your team is falling back to particular versions to make sure that they understand this fell back to version 01, had some changes in it. And if that is incorrect, you can always fall back to the original version if necessary. Regardless of if you have a version control system or you're using reusable asset service, have a common and or secure network file share for access by your authorized stakeholders. Before we wrap up, I want to talk about some closing tips. The idea is to keep your project or program instance as light and efficient as possible. Next, we're going to talk about package management, image management, keeping security and NDA or non-disclosure agreement projects in separate secure Sparx instances, of course, according to your legal department, and using search to manage the Sparx SQL data instance in a private and controlled manner. With dozens of modelers and the projects they are working on over the course of a year, we need a way for them to tell the model administrator as well as the project manager when their projects are done or their delivery efforts are done or even done. In this large-scale project or LSP, when we drop a package into this Kanban, it will manage and create the tag values for you. You can then build SQL to expose LSP tracking and create reports to understand which packages are tracked as archived or otherwise. Sparx makes it very easy for you to stay focused, and using the focus window is critical for your productivity as well as the team's productivity. Go to the Start tab, Design, and All Windows panel, and place the window in a smart place for you to use. Next, I want to talk about image management. And so if we go to Settings, Reference Data, Images, in Image Manager, be very strict on who creates new images. So these are custom images I created, and these are PNG or JPEG. Do not use bump files, BMPs. So these are canned from Sparx that are just happen to be in BMP files. Use JPEG or PNG files. They're much more smaller, and especially when you have very large projects, you do not want to use up your database memory or other memory when you're managing these. To help control these practices, you can have good training for stakeholders to authorize them to do things. You can also configure group permissions to block modelers from doing bad things. For example, do not allow clients and modelers to manage diagrams. This will block the ability to do anything with images under group permissions. When they don't have permissions to manage diagrams, you can see here that the images under reference data is disabled. Next, we're going to talk about security and non-disclosure agreement project templates, or NDA templates. And so after you build a project template that you want to use or reuse, you can clone it and configure it specifically for security and NDA project reuse. These templates are configured by your model administrator. They have stricter rules and constraints that may be applied to these projects. These projects typically have similar permissions and constraints. Auditing, reporting, and analytics are managed much more diligently in these according to your legal and regulatory guidelines. Most, if not all, packages are locked, and a separate or more secure file share or reusable asset service RAS instance is used, including your version control system code repository. Only security model administrators or managers are allowed to export this data. That's via XMI, Exchange, and other export purposes. Reference data is managed separately from general project reference data. Next, we're going to talk about search, find, and project practices. While there are no current permissions for search, find, and project capabilities, you should provide standard practices for creating, naming, and approving custom searches. Any search not approved by governance should be immediately removed. All modelers should be able to make submissions to governance team to have their custom SQL applied to the standard project template. All right, we're going to wrap up now. Wow, modeling practices was a large subject for us to cover. And the last episode was about large-scale projects in Sparx. We've had up to 25,000 stakeholders coming in through Prolaborate, 1,000 modelers using Sparx in the cloud. And working with large Sparx EA projects doesn't have to be complicated or chaotic. With the right practices, you can model at scale, collaborate effectively, and truly deliver on your enterprise objectives. Thanks for watching. If you found this helpful, leave a comment down below. I'd be very interested to know what your biggest modeling challenges are in your big projects. And don't forget to subscribe if you're not already for more insights on UML, computer-aided software engineering tools, and enterprise architecture modeling and deployment. So until that next episode, happy modeling.